Today I'm going to talk to you about embodied hypernetworks. So this is an example of an embodied hypernetwork from an embryo. Goes from a single cell to a large number of cells with different tissue types. You can see that these hypernodes have constituent nodes inside of them, and they divide and differentiate into these different structures. So this is a temporal representation. This is a spatial representation of the same data, where you have a spatial orientation of these different hypernodes and how they divide over time into new hypernodes with constituent nodes inside them. So this is a nice representation of things like the Drosophila embryo or the human heart. And one feature is that they have subgraphs, which you can see here, with selective connectivity. So there's differentiation over time, but these different subgraphs are connected. And so we can see this in different ways. The embodied aspect can also be used to model computational agents. This is the life cycle of a computational agent where it develops. This is on the right, an example of an anterior and a posterior end and left-right polarity and the network in between those sensors and effectors. And you can see that we can model the space in between the sensors and effectors as these increasingly complex hypergraphs with hypernodes. And there's heredity between the hypernodes in different stages. So you can see here with the blue lines or the red lines, you have cell division and cell differentiation represented in these hypergraphs. And so we can also model things in the nervous system as well. We can go from different types of network representations and put them together using this approach. So if we have a sensory conceptual relationship, we can use a hairball network that then can be broken down into a bipartite network that can then be joined together by these sensory conceptual genealogies showing this relationship over time. We also have different measures that we can extract for this type of network. So one is proportional temporal branching, showing that relationship between ancestral hypernodes and descendant hypernodes. We have this relationship of directed acyclic mappings, which captures convergence and divergence of information and cell transfer between hypernode categories. And you can see this for the first example from the nervous system that I showed before. And then this modularity with these anastomoses, or these selective connections between the subgraphs. In future directions, we'd like to move towards sort of defining what a embodied hypernode is. So I've talked about embodied hypernodes rather in an empty manner, but we have to ask the question, are these generic reservoirs for individual nodes, or are these defined in different ways? And so there's a role for epistemology here, defining the whole, finding the connections between network science, category theory, and branching theory, and figuring out these processes of interaction. Thank you for your attention.